modern Afghanistan, located at the crossroads of Central and South Asia, has been a center of trade, conquest, and cultural exchange for thousands of years. Its strategic location along the ancient Silk Road and its rugged terrain have made it both a coveted prize for empires and a resilient land of independent tribes. Afghanistan's history is one of rich cultural heritage, but also of repeated invasions, internal conflicts, and foreign interventions.
This video provides a comprehensive overview of Afghanistan's history, tracing its journey from ancient empires to its complex modern-day political landscape.
Afghanistan's history dates back to prehistoric times, with evidence of human habitation as early as 50,000 years ago. Archaeological findings at sites such as Bamiyan and Mundigak reveal the existence of settled communities around 3000 BCE. These early societies engaged in farming, trade, and metallurgy. Achaemenid and Alexander's influence, 6th–4th century BCE, Afghanistan first entered recorded history under the Achaemenid Empire of Persia, when Cyrus the Great conquered the region in the 6th century BCE. The provinces of Bactria, Arya, and Satyajidya were incorporated into the Persian Empire. This Persian influence introduced Zoroastrianism and connected Afghanistan to the vast trade networks of the Achaemenids. In 330 BCE, Alexander the Great invaded the region during his conquest of the Persian Empire. Alexander's campaigns in Afghanistan were particularly arduous due to the rugged terrain and fierce resistance from local tribes. After his death in 323 BCE, the region became part of the Seleucid Empire, and later the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom, which saw a fusion of Greek and Central Asian cultures. Greek influence was particularly strong in Bactria, modern-day northern Afghanistan, where Greek art, architecture, and coinage thrived. Kushan Empire and the spread of Buddhism, 1st Street 3rd century CE, one of the most significant empires to emerge in Afghanistan was the Kushan Empire, 1st Street 3rd century CE, which controlled a large part of northern Afghanistan, as well as parts of modern-day Pakistan, India, and Central Asia. The Kushan rulers, particularly Kanishka, were patrons of Buddhism. Under their reign, Afghanistan became a major center for Buddhist learning and culture. The Gandhara region, which included parts of Afghanistan, became known for its Greco-Buddhist art, which combined Greek artistic styles with Buddhist themes. The famous Bamiyan Buddhas, colossal statues carved into the cliffs of central Afghanistan, are a testament to the region's Buddhist heritage during this period. The Islamic conquest and the rise of empires, 7th–16th century, Islam began to spread into Afghanistan in the 7th century with the expansion of the Rashidun Caliphate. In 651 CE, Arab forces defeated the Sasanian Empire at the Battle of Nehayvand, and Islam gradually spread across the region, although it took centuries to fully take root. By the 9th century, Afghanistan became part of the Samanid Empire, which was one of the first Islamic dynasties to emerge in the region. The Samanids promoted Islamic culture, art, and literature. Ghazni, a city in central Afghanistan, emerged as a center of Islamic learning and power under the rule of the Ghaznavid Empire, 977–1186 CE. The Ghaznavids, particularly Mahmud of Ghazni, expanded their empire into northern India and played a key role in the spread of Islam into the Indian subcontinent. After the fall of the Ghaznavids, the Ghurid Empire rose to power, furthering the Islamic influence in Afghanistan and India. The Ghurids, based in Ghor, were instrumental in establishing the Delhi Sultanate in northern India. Mongol invasion and the Timurid Renaissance, 13th–15th century. In 1219, Afghanistan experienced one of the most devastating events in its history, the Mongol invasion led by Genghis Khan. The Mongol invasion caused widespread destruction, particularly in the cities of Balkh, Herat, and Bamiyan. Entire populations were wiped out, and Afghanistan's once thriving cities were reduced to ruins. Despite the destruction, the region eventually recovered under the rule of Tamerlane, Timur, a Turco-Mongol conqueror who established the Timurid Empire, 1370–1507. Herat became the capital of the empire and a hub of cultural and intellectual activity during the Timurid Renaissance. Scholars, poets, and artists such as Jami, Ali Shir Navai, and Bizard flourished in Herat, producing significant works of Persian literature and miniature painting. The early modern period, Safavids, Mughals, and Hotak rule, 16th–18th century. By the early 16th century, Afghanistan was caught between the rival Safavid Empire of Persia and the Mughal Empire of India. The Safavids, who were Shia Muslims, controlled Herat and western Afghanistan, while the Sunni Mughals controlled Kabul and the eastern part of the country. In the early 18th century, the region saw the rise of the Hotak dynasty, an Afghan Pashtun dynasty that briefly ruled Afghanistan and Persia. The Hotaks, under Mirwais Hotak and later his son Mahmud Hotak, led a rebellion against the Safavids and captured the Persian capital of Isfahan in 1722. However, the Hotak dynasty was short-lived, as it was overthrown by Nader Shah, a Persian general, in 1738. The Durrani Empire, the foundation of modern Afghanistan, 1747 to 1823. Modern Afghanistan traces its origins to the Durrani Empire, founded by Ahmad Shah Durrani in 1747. Ahmad Shah, a leader of the Abdali, later known as Durrani, Pashtun tribe, united the various Afghan tribes and established an empire that extended from eastern Iran to northern India. Under Ahmad Shah's leadership, Kandahar, Kabul, and Peshawar became important centers of power. Ahmad Shah is often considered the father of the nation, for his role in unifying Afghanistan and creating a distinct Afghan identity. His empire, however, began to weaken after his death, and by the early 19th century, Afghanistan had fragmented into smaller regional kingdoms. The Anglo-Afghan Wars and British influence, 19th century. In the 19th century, Afghanistan became a focal point in the Great Game, the geopolitical struggle between the British Empire and Imperial Russia for influence in Central Asia. Afghanistan's strategic location made it a buffer state between British-controlled India and Russian territories in Central Asia. The First Anglo-Afghan War, 1839 to 1842, was a disastrous campaign for the British. After initially installing a puppet ruler, Shah Shuja, the British were forced to retreat from Kabul, and their forces were nearly annihilated. Despite this, the British maintained influence over Afghan foreign policy. The Second Anglo-Afghan War, 1878 to 1880, resulted in the British briefly occupying Afghanistan, but they eventually withdrew, recognizing the sovereignty of Abdul Rahman Khan, who became known as the Iron Emir, for his efforts to modernize and centralize the Afghan state. In 1893, the Durand Line was drawn, demarcating the border between British India and Afghanistan. This line, which remains a contentious issue to this day, divided the Pashtun tribes, leaving many on the Indian, later Pakistani, side of the border. Afghanistan's struggle for independence and early 20th century reforms. Afghanistan maintained its independence through the late 19th and early 20th centuries, but it was not until the Third Anglo-Afghan War in 1919 that the country fully regained control of its foreign policy. Under the leadership of King Amanullah Khan, Afghanistan declared its independence from British influence in the Treaty of Rawalpindi. Amanullah Khan embarked on an ambitious campaign of modernization, seeking to reform Afghan society, economy, and governance. He introduced Western-style education, promoted women's rights, and sought to modernize Afghanistan's infrastructure. However, his reforms sparked opposition from conservative factions, and he was forced to abdicate in 1929. The Kingdom of Afghanistan and Cold War politics, 20th century. After Amanullah's abdication, Afghanistan experienced a period of political instability until Muhammad Nadir Shah came to power in 1930. Nadir Shah's reign was short-lived, as he was assassinated in 1933. His son, Zahir Shah, ascended the throne and ruled Afghanistan as a constitutional monarch for 4 decades, from 1933 to 1973. Under Zahir Shah, Afghanistan remained neutral during World War II and the early Cold War. However, the country became a battleground for Cold War rivalries, as both the United States and the Soviet Union provided aid in an attempt to influence Afghan politics. During this period, Afghanistan made strides in education, infrastructure, and economic development, but tensions between conservative rural factions and progressive urban elites continued to simmer. In 1973, Zahir Shah was overthrown in a coup led by his cousin, Muhammad Daud Khan, who established a republic. Daud's regime was marked by increasing ties with the Soviet Union and efforts to modernize the country, but his rule was cut short by a communist coup in 1978. The Soviet invasion and Afghan Civil War, 1979 to 1992, the Saur Revolution of 1978, led by the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, PDPA, established a communist government in Afghanistan. The new regime, however, faced widespread resistance from Islamic and tribal factions, which feared the erosion of traditional values. In 1979, the Soviet Union intervened to support the PDPA government, launching a decade-long military occupation. The Soviet-Afghan War, 1979 to 1989, was a brutal conflict, with the Afghan Mujahideen, Islamic fighters, waging a guerrilla war against the Soviet forces. The Mujahideen received significant support from the United States, Pakistan, and other countries. The war devastated Afghanistan, killing over 1 million people and displacing millions more. In 1989, the Soviets withdrew, but Afghanistan descended into civil war as various Mujahideen factions fought for control. The rise of the Taliban and US invasion, 1990s–2001, in the chaos of the civil war, a new movement emerged, the Taliban, a group of Islamic students, Talibs, led by Mullah Muhammad Omar. The Taliban quickly gained support for its promise to restore order and implement strict Islamic law. By 1996, the Taliban had captured Kabul and established the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. The Taliban imposed a harsh interpretation of Sharia law, banning education for women, destroying cultural monuments like the Bamiyan Buddhas, and harboring Al-Qaeda, the terrorist group responsible for the September 11, 2001 attacks in the United States. In response to 9/11, the United States and its allies launched Operation Enduring Freedom, invading Afghanistan and overthrowing the Taliban regime. The US-led coalition helped establish a new Afghan government under Hamid Karzai, but the Taliban regrouped and continued to wage an insurgency. The post-Taliban era and ongoing conflict, 2001–present, after the fall of the Taliban, Afghanistan embarked on a process of rebuilding, with the help of international aid. A new constitution was adopted in 2004, and elections were held, establishing Afghanistan as an Islamic republic. Hamid Karzai and later Ashraf Ghani served as presidents. Despite significant progress in education, women's rights, and infrastructure, Afghanistan remained plagued by instability. The Taliban insurgency continued, particularly in rural areas, and the presence of foreign troops fueled local resentment. The rise of ISIS-K, Islamic State, Khorasan province, further complicated the security situation. In 2021, after nearly 2 decades of US military presence, the United States and NATO forces withdrew from Afghanistan, and the Taliban swiftly regained control of the country. The fall of Kabul in August 2021 marked the end of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and the re-establishment of the Islamic Emirate under the Taliban. Conclusion: Afghanistan's history is a complex narrative of empires, invasions, and internal struggles. Its strategic location and rugged terrain have made it both a cultural crossroads and a battleground for competing powers. Today, Afghanistan faces significant challenges as it seeks to recover from decades of war and political instability. However, its resilient people and rich cultural heritage remain central to its identity as it navigates the challenges of the 21st century.